picture was a top-secret photographer for the Navy. He never should have shot one and kept a top-secret photo for himself. But I saw it, and of course this was during the Cold War. This is approximately, I'm pretty sure it was the summer of 1964. And I did nothing. I was one of those fellows that joined the Marine Corps Reserve my junior year in high school, and of course they told me to stay right where I was, and with my Marine Corps experience, and you know, with the Cold War going on, I just felt it was best to leave it a secret, and that's what I did. I left it a secret.
Now, this gentleman was a friend of yours?
He was had just left the Navy. We had I was living in one of those Oak Ridge apartments that they built. You know, they built a 75,000 person community up there overnight. You know, when they were making the atomic bomb in the 40s, and I was in one of those apartments. I was in one of those. It was a 3-unit apartment building, and he had moved in down at the end. He and his wife, and they were nice enough people. And I actually. Either during that time or before that, I took him with me on a couple of news stories. One time, and I don't want Tennessee to sound like the Wild West, but he went with me one time when somebody tried to kill the county sheriff, and he got some good still pictures while I was, I and my assistant were shooting the news film, and so he was a good photographer. Of course, if I had used that information in to, of course, I had the outlets. You know, I had United Press International and wires and the newspaper and TV stations. Plus, you know, various. I would, of course, I just didn't feel that it would serve my country at that time to release it to the public. We had a secret that the Soviets didn't have. But as I said, the Cold War was going on, and I felt like we need to keep the secret.
Right. This was a still photo you saw. It wasn't a. It was a
still photo, but it was marked on the back, top secret.
And could you see any propulsion coming out of the craft?
I asked him about that. There was no effort. There was no apparent exhaust. The bottom of the craft was smooth. It had no apparent landing gear at all. In other words, it was apparently it just sat wherever it sat when it was on when it was docked, and it just took off. He said they would run the personnel off the base, give them liberty and all that, on the weekends. And then they would fly it, and then they said that then there would be a lot of reports of flying saucers in the area, you know, on the weekends.
I bet, yeah.
And he said it flew high, and it flew well.
Did he know much about these? Did he say that they were?
Well, somewhere along the line, knowing that I was a reporter, he felt like he better quit talking, and he did. You know, but that's about as much I got out. I do recall, I think, that he said it didn't make a whole lot of noise when it flew, you know, as far as the propulsion. And he had no, or he either didn't have an idea how it was propelled, or he just didn't want to say anything else.
Yeah. So are you, do you know if he's still alive? Have you been in touch with him in recent years?
He later left Oak Ridge. His, like I say, his little wife was from Arizona to start with, and but now I got the feeling that he was originally a Tennessee native. I don't know, you know, from what part of the country he's from, but or at least from the South. He later became, if I'm not mistaken, an Oak Ridge policeman. So
really?
He retired out of Oak Ridge, yeah. And I feel like, you know, I'm not that young anymore, and I feel like, maybe a little foolish for not revealing it, but at this point in life, I thought, well, probably somebody ought to know it. I personally do know that what I saw in that photo, and I personally do believe that we did do experimenting and did some developing. Where we got the technology, I don't know that.
Right.
But we could speculate on that. But I know we had something that would fly, and it flew fairly effectively from what he had to say to me, about it.
Yeah. Did he just kind of spontaneously bring the photo over to you, or surprise you, or?
No, he didn't. I think he about choked because his wife brought it over. She didn't.
Oh, I see.
Of all things, I go in and there it is on my coffee table.
Uh-huh. Did your wife see it too, or were you married at the time?
Yes, she saw it. Yes, she saw it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Was it a black and white photo?
Yes, it was black and white. And that's the reason I had to speculate that it was probably navy blue gray, or something, because it looked like that. And like I said, I couldn't see the pilot himself or his face or anything like that, but I could see the silhouette of the pilot. It was just a little bubble. It looked almost like the, cap over. It was just a bubbled cockpit on top of the.
Well, I've had reports over the years of very.
And I sat on that for all these years.
Mm-hmm.
I told one of my fellow broadcasters a few years ago. He suggested, well, maybe we'll break it locally or something like that. But then I sat on it a little bit longer, and I just happened to. I thought, well, I kept this a secret long enough. While I'm still on this earth, I think maybe I ought to share that with something.
We appreciate that.
I'm a history buff. I watch the History Channel and some of these other channels, and I'm fascinated with the unknown, things that that has happened, and I have seen the testimony, where they actually saw this retired officer had seen a huge vehicle, but it had landing gears and everything, and of course it was, in some of the hangars. I've seen some of that, and I thought, well, I don't doubt this. I don't doubt that because I've seen a smaller version of but this thing didn't have landing gears. It was, it didn't have any obvious or visible means of a conventional, like jet propulsion or even propellers or anything like that. It just flew. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that would even match up even more so with what you have there. I had enough. I had some physics in high school and college, so it would leave me at a real let's say I wouldn't understand exactly how the darn thing got in the air to start with.
I don't think too many of us do. Yeah, I mean, if it's anti-gravity. Well, I've had reports of humanoids in flying saucers over the years. Perhaps they are ours. Do you know how to get in touch with this gentleman? Have you been in touch with him?
I don't know that he's even alive. And with both of us being, I'm in my 70s, so I feel like perhaps I should go ahead and reveal this. I don't know how big your audience is. I don't even know where you are right now.
Well, I'm in Helena, Montana, but with the internet anymore, I mean, we're everywhere, and I have a little report up on my site of what you told me.
Okay. Well, now the world knows, I guess.
Yeah, they know. And we appreciate your report. When you and I talked a week or two ago, James, you said you actually interviewed Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford. They weren't presidents at the time. Is that right?
Yeah. Richard Nixon. This was after he had lost his governorship in California.
Yeah.
You won't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. But anyway.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember him telling me this. Yeah.
He came in. I was news director at a Bristol radio station, Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia. And he came in to garner votes. This was 1966. He came in to garner votes for, get some new bills for when he planned to run for president in 68. And so, if I got to talk to him. He was a gentleman. He was a good interview, no problems. I expected maybe some difficulty there. Didn't happen. But He was a good one. I think probably one of my interviews I'm most proud of. I interviewed Reggie Jackson before he became a big baseball star.
Oh, really?
I didn't tell you that. Yeah, that's right.
Well, you didn't tell me that. That's exciting.
He played for the Birmingham A's.
Oh, yeah. He was a great ball player, yeah.
I think he went up to Major League the year I interviewed him. They brought him up. And the next year he was Rookie of the Year. But he was easy to talk to then before he got bugged by by the media so much. So he was a pleasant interview, too.
Uh-huh.
I recall that he had played for, I believe, Arizona State, either Arizona or Arizona State or Arizona.
No, I'm not sure about that. I know where he played in the majors with
But I remember when he became Mr. October, yes.
Yeah. And you interviewed Gerald Ford, too, you said.
Yes. Congressman John Duncan brought him to town before he was when he was still
Congress?
a congressman, yeah. And this was some years before Nixon had his mess up, and
right.
Ford kind of came in the side door for unusual period of history there. Very unusual.
Right. Well, both Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon have a little bit associated with UFOs. Or Gerald Ford headed up the congressional investigation UFOs in the late 60s, and then his congressional district, that's where they had that big wave of sightings in Michigan. So he was working with that too, trying to get some resolution, and that's when J. Allen Hynek, who was a scientific advisor for Project Blue Book, said they were swamp gas. And of course, after he was off the Blue Book project, when Blue Book was terminated, he talked about, well, they wanted me to say something, so that's what he said. And Richard Nixon allegedly, he was good friends with Jackie Gleason, and Jackie Gleason claimed that Richard Nixon kind of got him a tour of a very secret base in Florida, and he saw alien beings. That's what he said, and he told his wife about it before he died. So
yes, I heard the same story, and I'm wondering. I believe it may have been from. There was a fellow in Knoxville. I won't call him by name. I think he's passed on because I haven't been able to get in touch with him. But he almost looked like Winston Churchill. But he was a direct descendant from Ben Franklin, and his father owned when he was younger. His father owned a golf course in New Jersey, and he caddied for Jackie Gleason and Buddy Hackett. And really? I believe he relayed that same story to me before it made national news, and so you just meet interesting people, particularly in the broadcast business, and
right. There's a question from a chat room for you, James. The question is, who is in possession of this photograph to date?
I doubt if it exists. I imagine he destroyed it. That's what I would have done. Before my wife put it on somebody on the wrong coffee table, But this was go back to '64, and probably it wasn't. I don't know when he left the Navy, but he was pretty young. So I was guessing him at probably in his late 20s at the time.
So if he was alive, he'd be younger than you now, or I don't know how.
If he were alive, he would be about my age, because I was probably.
Well, he'd be about your age. Okay.
I was in my late 20s. I had been. I left college in.
1964. Yeah, that's
60.
Getting close to 50 years ago now.
So I'd only been in the business for about 4 years, and then I traveled for. Well, yeah, that's right. All right.
Here's another question, James, and I don't know whether you can answer this or not, but I'll pose it to you. Question: what are your thoughts on Clifford Stone or any former military who claim to have been part of alien spacecraft cleanup crew between the 1960s and the 1980s? Do you know anything about that?
No, I didn't know anybody that did that, but I do think, well, after all, the Army or the Army Air Force back then, it was what they called the Army Air Corps, I guess, before it became the Air Force. Anyway, they released that news thing on the Arizona affair in 1947? Yeah, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was rescinded. And I think probably it went straight to Harry Truman, and he said, "No, we can't tell him.
Right.
Let's create something else." And of course, I have seen the interviews and some of the stories on TV about that. I will tell you one thing that I don't think I've divulged to anybody other than I may have divulged to you when I was talking to you a week or two ago. I played a little high school football when I was a sophomore. I was about too little to play, but we would get dressed for the varsity, if you'd earned it that week in practice or whatever. And this was the first week of the season. I played for a high school team in Knoxville, and I was hoping to get dressed that night. And there were about 6 or 8 of us outside waiting, maybe to get our name called so we could go and get dressed for the game. That didn't necessarily mean we'd play. It just meant we might get to watch the game from a little bit better vantage point. But
right.
We saw, it was about dusk, and we saw some lights moving along the horizon. And now this was so long ago. This was about 1952. I was a sophomore in high school.
Uh-huh.
They were yellowish, greenish, and they looked just like dots or something moving along the sky. They were moving parallel to the ground and maybe 10 degrees above the horizon in the east of us because of the way the football field was laid out. And when they reached one spot in space there, it was almost like they rolled off the table. They all started going down. Each one of those bright lights, when it reached that exact spot in space, it went down. But it didn't go straight down. It went down at about a 60-degree angle.
Really?
And they all disappeared. And, of course, like I said, there were 6 or 8 of us there. And somebody said, "Did you see that?" And, of course, I said, "See what?" We all saw it. And they said, "Yes." We agreed. We didn't want to be criticized, and so we didn't say anything about it. And that's kind of amazing because I was contacted since I talked with you for a little reunion from that high school, and I'll probably within 2 or 3 weeks I'll be going back to that reunion. And I hope some of these guys that played ball with me back then are still around. We'll be.
Well, bring it up and see. Let me know if they remember. Here's another question, James, coming in from the chat room. This question is, I'll read it verbatim. Has James done any journalistic investigations on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base about their alleged involvement in special black operations programs?
Now, I'm not the same Jim Clarkson. He may be related to me because I had some of my great uncles moved to the West. One moved to Washington State, another one to Oregon. So we may be distant cousins or something. But that's another James Clark. I read about him. He was he was the one that revealed the story of the secretary that was up there by Patterson.
Yeah. No, this question was for you, not for that.
No,
James.
I'm not the same person. I'm Jim Clarkson, but I'm not the same person. My radio name at that time was just Jim Clark. I left the son off.
Oh, okay. And, well, the listener wanted to know if you yourself had any personal experience in any journalistic.
That's why I mentioned that as a high schooler. Yeah. We saw that, and all of us decided we'd be quiet because people would think we were crazy. Incidentally, I believe that was the same summer that they were spotted on radar over Washington, D.C.
Yes, it was that summer. That was 1952. Outside of 1947 was a really high UFO reporting year, and you can look at the Blue Book reports, and that was the same year that craft passed over a football game in West Virginia. That was the where they saw the what do they call it, the Braxton County monster, and that happened in September of 1952. And so there were a lot of and like you stated, in 2 weekends in July of 1952, they spotted all those UFOs on radar over Washington, D.C.
As I recall, they even scrambled planes to chase them.
Yep. Yeah, they'd scramble them, and then they'd when they scramble the planes, the blips would disappear, and they'd come in and land again, and they'd show up again. And that cat and mouse game lasted all night, I guess, and two different weekends. There were a few pilots that did see some, but not the military pilots. That's the way I understand.
Incidentally, on that, where we kids, we were all, about 15 or 16 years old. I don't remember. I was, like I said, I was a sophomore in high school. But just east of this was Duff Field in Knoxville, Tennessee. If anybody's familiar with this area of the country, it was just east of us was a lake, one of these man-made lakes made in the Tennessee Valley by the TVA.
Right.
And they would whatever we saw in space there, above the horizon there, when they went down, they could have been going down towards what was a man-made lake called Douglas Lake, because it was directly east of us. And that was before I ever thought about people being the SMO, what do they call those? Unidentified submersive.
Yeah, USOs. Unidentified submerged objects. Yeah.
And that occurred to me just in recent time when I saw some of this where they seem to go in and out of the water without splashing and everything like that.
Yeah, they do, particularly off of Catalina Island in California. Get a lot of reports over there. So, well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on here, James? We certainly appreciate your time.
I've chatted with, the one other thing that that kind of scared me a little bit. I was chatting with I'm trying to think of the proper title, but he worked in aeronautics, and he was a physicist, and just
aeronautical engineer.
Aeronautical engineer. An aeronautical engineer, but he specialized. Yeah, he was a physicist basically. But this was 8 or 10 years ago. I was just chatting with him briefly, and I'm a good conversationalist, and I asked him about some of the things that there were about the particle guns and things like that, because I had seen those film of one of the what appeared to be some kind of space vehicle dodging a direct shot at it. As the you may have seen that film too. I don't know, but anyway, he said yes, they had particle gun, and maybe I don't suppose this is a secret because people talk about it, but they do have particle guns, and he said the darn things worked. But the speculation was that somebody tried to shoot something in space, out of space. It did look like a shot going right by the darn thing. It just changed directions. If you've seen that film from
that's a NASA film.
NASA film, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And sometimes they tell you more than you want to hear. I was just chatting with him. I didn't want to get him into any top secret things, but incidentally, one of my assistants when I was working in Oak Ridge was a fellow named. Now he had nothing to do with any of the secrets or anything, but he did shoot film for me. Jim Westcott. His dad was Ed Westcott, who was the official photographer for the Atomic Energy Commission on the atomic bomb and everything. I thought that was significant, because his dad was an excellent photographer, and Jim Westcott was a pretty good photographer too. So I was in some pretty good company there, when I was in Oak Ridge. I asked a few questions up there, and including asking Congressman Duncan about this. That's one of the few people I ever got pretty well acquainted with me, and he was a fine man. I asked him about what I saw, the USS Merrimack, that film, because he had no knowledge of that. Even if he did, some of the committees you've known, he might have, had an opportunity. The reason I asked that, but no, he had no knowledge of it, or at least he wasn't going to tell me. So that's kind of where it ended, because I thought, well, if a country wants to keep it secret, it probably should be kept secret. And
right. And here's another question, James. Question. I'll read it. The fellow who showed you the picture Did you know him well enough to know he wasn't just making up a story? This is a question.
No, he was thoroughly upset with his wife, and actually seemed to be a little bit fearful. I don't know whether he thought he was going to the brig or whether he thought somebody would come in and snuff him out or something. I don't know, but he wanted to. He didn't want to. All of a sudden, he just didn't want to talk to me either. He talked to me for a minute or two. I'm pretty disarming because I was pretty good at doing interviewing back then, and so he talked to me he asked 4 or 5 or 6 of my questions, and then he didn't want to talk anymore about it. So that was it.
Yeah.
But that was.
Well, I think that's a good answer, that he probably was on the level, because that's one thing we do in the UFO world. You interview a witness and you say, oh, I don't believe you. And if they get really upset about it, that means you're probably telling the truth. If they don't, it probably means you're fabricating something. And I've had that own experience. So.
Yeah, well, he knew his wife had violated. He should not have shot a picture of that and kept it for himself. And his wife shouldn't have brought it next door to show my wife. Basically, she brought it over there to show my wife, and I just happened to come in about that time.
Yeah.
Because when you're almost a one-man news bureau, which I was in Oak Ridge, sometimes you work 12, 14-hour day. So I was in and out all the time.
It was a long day. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything from a plane crash to a bank robbery to a double murder suicide, a few things like that. For a small Oak Ridge population at that time had dwindled. It peaked at about 75,000 people during World War II. It had dropped off to somewhere between 25 and 30,000 people by that time. But they were still enriching uranium and everything at Oak Ridge.
Yeah, they enriched the uranium at Oak Ridge, and then over there in Washington State, they